But the point being, you're riding a very specific horse. I'm not intending to teach you the exact calculations right now, just the basic indicators and the basic understanding, which is if you're riding an appreciation market, you want to try to purchase either in the lower half of the downturn or the beginning of the upturn, if you can, or somewhere in the upturn, halfway up if possible. And you want to sell at the top of the market or as the market is starting to decrease. I am Christina Suter, and this is the Real Estate Breakthrough Show, where we talk about the reality of real estate, the mindset you need in order to face the reality of what it is, and tips and tricks to get you moving forward in investing. I am your host, Christina Suter. So today I want to increase your education on real estate. Being an educated investor in real estate does truly make a difference in your long-term success as a real estate investor. Your capacity to be successful, to make knowledgeable decisions increases, but also it adjusts your risk tolerance. Some people who actually are not very knowledgeable in real estate, who are new to real estate, will actually gain a greater risk tolerance as they educate themselves towards understanding what they want to invest in. So education is highly valuable, both as a new investor and ongoingly as an investor, being able to continue to be an informed decision maker. Now, today's topic in particular, I want to talk about investing out of state and real estate cycles. And one of the reasons why I want to talk about this particular topic is because there really is a bifurcation in how markets work. There are highly appreciated and depreciating markets, and there are what one might call more stabilized markets. And in choosing to invest out of state, part of what you're choosing is what asset style you're wanting to invest in, or let me say it maybe this way, what market style you're wanting to invest in. You see, Denver, Colorado is very different from Los Angeles, which is different from Knoxville, Tennessee, which is different from Boise, Idaho. And they're similar in some ways, but they're very different. Los Angeles is much more like Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York. They can be high appreciating and high depreciating markets. Then you take something like a Denver, Colorado, or Colorado Springs, Colorado, or you take Boise, Idaho. I love Boise, Idaho because Boise, Idaho used to be to me, premier example of a stable market. Now, high appreciating markets generally have high demand, high density in their inner fill city. They generally have higher purchase prices, and the land underneath the asset is worth more. What comes with that higher density, higher demand, and the land itself underneath the asset being worth more generally is higher forces for appreciation, and therefore generally a higher depreciation during real estate downturns. Why would you invest in that kind of market? Because you're playing the appreciation ride. It's intentional. I call it, which racehorse do you want to ride on? If you want to ride on the racehorse, have high appreciation and high depreciation, you want to understand the rules of the road that go with that racehorse, or the rules of the racetrack that goes with that racehorse. If you want to invest in a stabilized market, generally, because there is not as high demand for each individual unit, and there isn't as high a cost of living for those units, the land underneath literally costs less than the land in Los Angeles does, or in the high density cities. The land itself costs less, and therefore you're paying more more of your purchase price goes towards the value of the asset, which isn't important unto itself. What's important to understand is that you generally get a higher cash on cash return. You can generally, used to be, not always now in multifamily markets. That's an unusual exception in my last 30 plus years of investing. But generally, if you go to a suburb of that type of city that's more long-term stabilized, you can get positive cash flow, positive rents, but lower appreciation. So that's the horse you're riding. You're riding the cash flow, long-term, low appreciation game, or you're riding the high appreciation horse, which means that you need to be aware of the timing. So let me share some information with you. So if you're seeing this on Roku TV or YouTube, then you can see the graphics that I'm about to deliver. For those of you who are listening on podcasts, then I'm going to have to describe this graphic. So I am on FRED, F-R-E-D, FRED. This is the St. Louis Federal Reserve. The St. Louis Federal Reserve, for some reason, versus other Federal Reserves, has an incredibly high level of maps and charts, specifically more charts. I don't actually know if they have any maps or not. That's a misnomer. I know they have charts, lots and lots of charts. Charts on Los Angeles, charts on Denver, charts on Colorado Springs, charts on Boise, Idaho. And so one of my favorite things, and what I want to show you, is that they have charts on home prices, charts on unemployment rate, charts on median household income, charts on total gross domestic product, GDP, for that particular county or that particular area. They have per capita personal income charts, unemployment rate in Orange County versus Los Angeles, income inequality, net county to county migration flow. So there's a lot of demographic information that is cultivated by the Labor Bureau, by the US government, that is tracked by the Fed, which is the St. Louis Federal Reserve being part of that, which is then put up on their website under this FRED, F-R-E-D. So if you type in FRED, housing chart, Los Angeles, then you will probably get the Los Angeles housing chart. But I wanted you to see here, residential population, that this is an incredibly rich resource for you. My sort of cornerstone when it comes to raw demographic information is either FRED or city-data.com. So I want you to get a sense for the amount of huge amount of data that is available on the FRED website. So now that you've seen that, let me show you the chart for, I had these all laid out, the chart for Los Angeles. This is the Case-Shiller Los Angeles Home Price Index. Case-Shiller covers major metropolitan cities, the 20 major metropolitan cities, and has a chart available for each one of those cities. And FRED is your easy access to those Case-Shiller charts. Now, if you look here, you can see there are distinct hump, down, hump, big hump, down, growing hump, which is where we are now, down. You can see there is a distinction to this chart of it basically showing cycles. Pretty straightforward. Now, I want you to compare that for a minute to, let's pick Knoxville, Tennessee. I've invested in Knoxville, Tennessee. So there you go. That's why I love visiting this chart. What I want you to notice, if you're looking at this visually, is that basically you'll see it is a 25 to 35 degree line, not 45 degree, but like a 20 degree line increasing across multiple years, literally from 1970 to 2015. It is almost a completely flat line. There is not huge indicators of increases and decreases based upon recessions or not. So just to teach you how to read this chart, the line obviously is the index, which is created by either Case-Shiller or created by FRED in order to try to mimic the Case-Shiller. But the gray bars in the middle of the graph, and when you go there and look, you'll know what I'm talking about, are the recessions. So as you see, the Knoxville line is almost flat and continuous, almost undisturbed by the recessions. This is a really good example of a positive cash flow, low or stabilized appreciation chart. Let's go look at LA again for a minute. And when you've seen LA versus that chart, you can see distinctly that the LA chart, let's see, you can see distinctly that the LA chart, which is the chart we're looking at now, that chart has an up and a down, and a huge up in 2006, not surprising, and a pretty distinctive down in 2010. And now we're again seeing almost a 45-degree rise in prices between 2012 to 2020. We don't see that on the more stabilized cities. Okay, now I wanted to give you these charts. I want you to understand them distinctly because there are different investment tactics for each type of these two investment markets. In Los Angeles, you're very much, or in all the cities that look like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, main city, Chicago, New York, high density. Even if you were to look at these numbers, and I don't know where, I've seen them published in newspapers, but I don't know where to find them on the internet other than, of course, Google. For St. Petersburg, Russia, right? Korea, Seoul, oh my gosh, Sydney, Australia, right? You can find very similar charts from major cities across all of the world, not just the nation of Los Angeles. Singapore, in particular, is a really good example of this. I've seen that chart. In a high appreciation market, you're riding the appreciation pony. You want to be aware that you are purchasing generally during an upturn, or quote unquote at the bottom of the market. Another person who talks about this, just so you know, is Bruce Norris. He has his quadrants of investing, and they specifically talk about how the markets move in different quadrants because a lot of his study has been in Los Angeles. So quadrants of investing. So you want to invest during quadrant 1 or 2 while the market is continuing to go up. You can't always promise you're going to invest in quadrant 1 right at the bottom of the market as the market is increasing. You can't promise to always invest in there. We're not going to always work that out, but you want to realize that you're probably investing either during an upturn or during a downturn, preferably at the beginning, towards the beginning of an upturn. You want to be aware there is going to be a top and there's going to be a time to sell, because generally you're not going to be holding on to these properties for cash flow. Southern California in particular, Long Beach, Manhattan Beach, Malibu, Santa Monica, Venice Beach, even further in Baldwin Park or Monterey Park, you're going to find that there are absolutely these type of cycles because all ships rise and fall on the tide. So it's not just the beach cities, it is also in the very stabilized larger neighborhoods that are further inland. So there's a top to the market. And you want to, if you can, sell somewhere closer to where you think the top is. Are you going to sell right at the top? That would be a stroke of luck. I don't know very many people who are able to say, today is the top of the market, today I'm going to sell and be right. So you want to sell somewhere close to the top of the market, or I am perfectly comfortable with selling while the market is stalling across the top, or even as the market slightly turns down, because a lot of the data doesn't hit the newspapers until almost 3 months to 6 months after the market has turned. Why is that the case? It takes 3 months worth of data for people to start getting that we really are seeing a decreasing in the market. There's also indicators across the top. When you hit the top and it starts to go across, there are indicators like days on market get stable or longer. That's across the top. Prices maintain similar price points. That's across the top. Pending sales starts to fall. That means you're heading across the top. Right at the beginning of those. That's when you get a sense for that the market is starting to turn. Another potential pre-indicator of the top, although it's not right at the top, but it's pretty close, is when the price for rehabbed or new construction per square foot is equal to or is equal to or crosses the line of the cost of existing. Actually, let me reverse that. It's when the price of new construction is the price of existing construction. The easiest way to explain it is the price of existing construction per square foot crosses or meets the line of new construction per square foot. So if you're going to pay $200 per square foot for new construction, during a regular market, you might pay about $150 for existing construction, for an existing home. But when you're paying $198 for an existing home per square foot, and it's $200 per square foot for a new home, you're just about to see the top of that market. There's not a lot of compression space left. There's also the affordability index, which Bruce Norris can explain to you as well. But the point being, you're riding a very specific horse. I'm not intending to teach you the exact calculations right now, just the basic indicators and the basic understanding, which is if you're riding an appreciation market, you want to try to purchase either in the lower half of the downturn or the beginning of the upturn, if you can, or somewhere in the upturn, halfway up if possible. And you want to sell at the top of the market or as the market is starting to decrease. Selling when the market is starting to decrease can be difficult, but it's better than holding on to it. If you're going to be selling while the market is decreasing, then you need to be willing to price it slightly under market, because people are wise enough to go, it takes 2 months or 3 months to close escrow, and it's going to be worth less in 2 to 3 months. So I want to see a house where I feel like I'm getting a good deal, so that the day that the market closes, it's still worth the value I've just purchased it at. Will it continue to slide in value? Yes, it will. And they seem to be willing to, purchasers seem to be willing to accept that. But if you want your house to be picked up and not languish on a decreasing market, you do absolutely need to price it under current market comps. It needs to be 2 to 3 months below current market comps, and then it will move judiciously. That is a high appreciating market. You're buying that property specifically to be able to play the appreciation game. You're generally not buying it for cash flow. If you do get some cash flow, you're lucky. All right, so let's talk about the long-standing markets. So this is Knoxville, Tennessee. In Knoxville, Tennessee, you can see there really isn't this pressure, this need to play this appreciation game. Yes, we're seeing a higher tail at the end when we're looking at 2015 to 2020, because there's such compression in general in the real estate market in the United States that we're even seeing some movement here in the Knoxville, Tennessee area of price increases where the line is about almost a 40-degree slant of increasing, which is pretty aggressive given that the rest of its line is about 20. When you're involved in that market and you're seeing this low pace line, you can see you're not trying to do market timing. You're collecting your cash flow. You're letting the value of the house continue to rise at a steady but solid pace. And eventually, maybe 10 years later, you might want to refinance your position in that property in order to be able to maintain that your cash on cash returns are a nice, comfortable or valuable level for your portfolio. If your returns get down to 3 or 4% cash on cash, you might look to refinance so that your returns continue to increase back above 6% cash on cash, or even maybe 8% or 10%. 10% is usually pushing it. 6 to 8% is a very nice window, in my opinion. Just an opinion. So you can see that we're not timing the exact market in Knoxville, Tennessee. We're not playing this appreciation game. We're holding an asset. Generally, it can be a single family, fourplex, multi-unit for a long-term play, and your greatest return is truly the cash on cash return you have, and you can sell it when you feel the building is ripe to either refinance or sell in the future. Now, before I finish that, so that's your two ponies. You've got the appreciation pony, you got the cash and cash pony. And you want to understand which market you're operating in. If you're looking for a rental unit, I generally suggest that you buy in a positive cash on cash market, the slower, more stabilized markets, which are not necessarily found easily in Southern California. If you're looking to play an appreciation game, Knoxville, Tennessee isn't the best place to do it. If you want to play an appreciation game in a non-appreciation market, then you're looking to do a version of a rehab. So you're looking to value add it because you've gotten it so low below market that you're now forcing the appreciation on the asset, so you can do a flip if you would like. One of the best places to do flips, of course, is in high appreciating markets, so that you have not only the forced value add that you have put into that asset, but also have the natural appreciation of the market continuing to increase the value of the property while you're holding it. It is definitely a more competitive market, can be harder to get into, can be harder to find a deferred maintenance value add in highly appreciative markets, but it is where lots of flippers have a tendency to do their work. So rentals versus flips. That's really the bottom line in understanding these two markets. Rentals do well in low stabilized markets, low appreciating or solid appreciating stabilized markets, and flips can do better in high appreciating markets. It doesn't mean you only do that or can only do that in those two markets. It's just easier and the markets are more built for it. But let me show you two markets. Let me close out with just two markets, two examples here. One of the things that I found perfectly interesting to you, just to share with you my observations, is that when you look here at the Case-Shiller for Denver, Colorado. Denver, Colorado was a low appreciating, relatively flat market until it legalized marijuana, and then it became a high appreciating market. You can see there's a little bit of a higher push in the 2005 area, but really it was when it legalized marijuana combined with the returns increasing since 2012, and it has taken on a distinctly 45-degree angle or higher in its chart as an appreciating market. So Denver seems to be moving from a stabilized, positive cash flow market to a high demand, high density infill market where there is now greater than a 45-degree line and double digits appreciation. That's one of my favorite observations, and it was because there was a regional change having to do with them legalizing marijuana previous to many other places inside of the United States. And then my last one is, I find particularly funny, is Boise, Idaho. Boise, Idaho. Boise, Idaho for a long time was my example of a long-term stabilized market. Cash flow, pretty much available, pretty easy. It's a pretty small city, or at least it was. It is now a growing city. And this to me is the most distinct and obvious of a transition from a low appreciating stabilized market, usually available high cash on cash for rentals, to a appreciation market. And you can see here, previous to 2005, you can see that the line of appreciation was somewhere between 5% degree to maybe a 15 to 20% angle on the appreciation line, maybe even 15, 20 might be pushing it, to all of a sudden in 2008, we saw it capping out at a clearly greater than 45-degree line, almost a, I would say, 60-degree appreciation line, dropping down again at another 60-degree, negative 60-degree depreciation line, and now increasing again at close to another 60-degree increasing and appreciating line. So Boise, Idaho has gone from a stabilized market to a high volatility market or an appreciating market. So I just wanted to give you these charts because when I look at the charts, it seems incredibly obvious to me how I can look at a housing chart and say, that is an appreciating market. That type of market is good for a certain type of play. And this is a stabilized market, and that market is good for a certain type of play. Appreciating markets, I like to do flips in them, and it's harder to find cash on cash. Cash on cash doesn't mean you don't buy a rental unit. You just accept that you're not going to get high cash returns for the first couple of years. In a stabilized market, you're purchasing it primarily for income, cash on cash returns, and not for appreciation. You might refinance out in 10 plus years in order to make your money work and buy another, whatever is appropriate for you in your portfolio. But you're going to probably refinance versus sell out unless the building itself has gotten too old and no longer fits your portfolio. So there you go. Investing out of state, doing your research to understand what kind of market you're looking to invest in to hopefully meet the goals of your investment, of the next movement in your investment portfolio. I am Christina Suter. You can find me at christinasuter.com, YouTube, Wilco TV, iHeartRadio, iTunes, and Spotify, and a variety of other places. Please, if you are a new investor, get yourself deeply educated and use these websites, FIBIPasadena.com to educate yourself, my YouTube channel to educate yourself, Ted McAvoy to educate yourself, the Norris Group. Another wonderful, wonderful way to educate yourself is the Norris Group, Norris, Norris as in Bruce Norris, although it's not the actor, the investor. All right, this is Christina Suter. Thank you so much.